June 14th, 2004. This was the day that viewers of all ages awoke to find that Cartoon Network had seemingly rebranded itself unannounced overnight, going from its prominent Powerhouse era full of varied yet exquisite bumpers to this 3D city featuring plenty of its original characters coexisting together in one set location. Many would say this is a day that would change their perception of the network forever. For some, this was the beginning of its downward spiral. To others, this marked the beginning of the best era the channel has ever had. As for myself, well, I'm somewhere in the middle. The mid-2000s was what I consider to be the silver age of Cartoon Network. Not quite up to par with the golden age Powerhouse era that preceded it, but still worthy of acclaim and recognition. In terms of programming, that is. This was a time when older shows were being moved off of the main network and over to Boomerang, and the newer, original series produced by the network were favored to be given the limelight. Cartoon Network during this time was still a booming utopia full of fresh ideas and animated entertainment, but that focus was given almost entirely to its brand new originals as its older Hanna-Barbera, Warner Brothers, and less successful original properties quickly began to disappear from the network, and many of the channel's popular blocks were moved or rebranded as well. The Powerhouse era had sort of alluded that this change was coming, with many of its bumpers featuring various characters all working in the same office space together.
What's your name again? Ed?
Yes, sir. With 2D.
Early days, I walk through place and know everybody name. Those days over.
Did you hit your head or something?
No, it just get crowded.
Which are also great bumpers in their own right, don't get me wrong, but the sudden overnight switch was shocking to a lot of people, myself included. Although, I just so happened to be on a trip to Disney World in Orlando, Florida with my family while this was happening, and I distinctly remember going over to my friend's house the day after we got back from that trip and seeing Baby Looney Tunes on his TV set with the new Cartoon Network logo in the corner. 7-year-old me was so confused at the time. I instantly missed the classic checkerboard and thought that the network was essentially over, but it quickly grew to become my favorite era of the network in terms of the bumpers specifically. This is Cartoon Network. In terms of its scheduling and library of shows, sure, the Powerhouse era has it beat, but the way that the CN City united the channel's characters into one giant, intricate world is genius in its own way. Oh, and might I just mention that the first show to ever air on Cartoon Network during the City era was none other than the Powerpuff Girls. Just wanted to throw that out there. Now, we could sit here and reminisce for the next 20 minutes or so, but that's not really the point of this video. Unfortunately, like all good things, they must come to an end, and in 2007, CN City was sent to the grave in favor of the summer and fall eras of that year, which were more like transitional periods on the way to the Nudes era rather than like fully complete, fleshed out eras themselves. There was also the transitional Yes era, but I don't like to talk about that. Now, I am not here to sit and lecture you on why the City era of Cartoon Network was this incredible thing that kids these days will never get to experience, blah blah blah, me childhood. No. Rather, I want to break down and examine why the network has never been able to recapture the same energy and spectacle of this time period in the 15 or so years it's been since this collection of bumpers was fully laid to rest. Cartoon Network is a shell of its former self, and has been for quite a while now. I think most kids today would even agree that the channel isn't all that exciting to watch. Hell, the network just received less than 100k viewers on one of its new episode premieres. Like, that is terrible compared to the numbers the network used to see just 5 years ago. Sure, Cartoon Network has produced other hit animated series in the time since the end of the City era, like Chowder, Adventure Time, Steven Universe, and everyone's favorite Teen Titans Go, but most of the channel is severely lacking. A lot of the times people say, this thing was so much better back in my day, it's usually personal bias talking. But sometimes there are legitimate cases for why people are disappointed in what something they used to really like has become. For me, those things are Pokemon and Cartoon Network. Today I want to take a more objective approach, look at the factors, draw conclusions based on how times have changed, that sort of thing. I've managed to summarize why I firmly believe the network will likely never try this again into 3 major categories, and as such, I'm going to be tackling each of those topics one at a time. I would like to throw in a disclaimer that I'm not saying it's impossible for this to happen, but based on what I've observed, I think it is highly unlikely that we will ever see another CN City again. Without further ado, let's get started.
Consider the house rocked.
I think it's important to start with what makes the City era so unique compared to any other era the network has ever had. The defining factor that makes this era so remarkable and unparalleled can be summed up in one singular word: cohesion. The CN City is a world of cohesion where the network's entire cartoon collection thrives together in one consistently thematic setting. Nearly every bumper you'd see during this time took place somewhere in this city. Whether it was the Ed's cul-de-sac or Titan Tower, this location was an entire world that we got to catch tiny glimpses of in between shows. These bumpers would give us tastes of what was going on in that world here and there, and it would be up to us as the audience to fill in the blanks. That effect cannot be achieved just by showing a bunch of random ads throughout the day with the CN logo on it. Certainly, there can be ongoing stories across various advertisements on a channel, but the only way to create this sense of coherence is to develop an entire world that the viewer can immerse themselves in. This level of immersion through bumpers can only be achieved through the presentation and diversification of the setting and the consistent exposure to it. By only providing a small window that peers into this world, the viewer themselves is given the freedom to imagine all of the other events going on in their own mind. This inherently provokes the viewer to create their own stories, latch onto the mysteries of the city, and develop their own theories for what the lives of these characters are like off-screen. Fans of the network will have already developed connections to the characters through watching their shows. They've come to learn what they're like, so seeing them living together in harmony and going about their lives leads said fans to infer what they're probably up to. The city also gives these characters an added level of humanity. Miss Bellum gets her haircut just like we do. The Teen Titans play video games just like we do. Johnny Bravo does his laundry just like our parents did. Getting to see characters in brief moments of everyday life makes them feel real. And when you have that established connection to a character through their show, there is a great sense of gratification in seeing them do something relatable. Everybody loves seeing their favorite characters. It doesn't matter what age you are. Everyone didn't lose their mind when Thor showed up in Infinity War for nothing. Why? Because people love the characters. They're attached to them. They've formed connections with them. And people love crossovers. I think the successes of the MCU and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate can both attest to that. Essentially, when you think about it, the CN City is one big crossover. Characters from all these different shows coming together, talking to each other, having a ball. That's guaranteed success right there. I mean, that's why the Cartoon Fridays block was so appealing, right? Another factor that added to this era's success, which is sorely lacking today, is that there were so many shows the network could pull from. One bumper has the Scooby Gang race the Megas XLR team. Another features Samurai Jack and Johnny Bravo doing laundry together. Blue and Laszlo go around the city singing a song together. There was a giant summer festival in 2005. Previous eras certainly had other events, sure. In fact, the Powerhouse era was practically known for having tons of different blocks, marathons, and so on, but the City era was able to actually place these events in the city itself. They weren't just for the viewers, they were for the characters too. All of the characters celebrated Halloween and Christmas just like the viewing audience. Seeing that in the bumpers gave the events more depth and enhanced the connection between the programming and the viewer because said viewer felt like they were a part of the celebration with the characters rather than just watching the event isolated from them. During the City era, there were 20 different series airing on the network that were given individual collections of bumpers to air in between commercials and such. Justice League, Tom and Jerry, Dexter's Lab, Powerpuff Girls, Grim Adventures, Foster's Home, the list goes on. Bear in mind that I am only referring to shows that were given a multitude of different bumpers for their show. Other programs were still airing on the network, such as the aforementioned Johnny Bravo and Samurai Jack. 2020 Cartoon Network does not have nearly as many series to pull from, but I'll be getting to that part shortly. My ultimate takeaway from analyzing what made the City era work so well is that I would argue it is practically impossible for the network to recapture what the City era did without doing the same thing again. Generally speaking, bumpers are these standalone, independent clips that are just a once and done sort of deal. But by tying everything together in this one setting, proper cohesion is achieved, and immersion can begin to thrive. A cohesive world is full of stories just waiting to be told, after all.
You seem to like black shirts quite a lot.
And it looks like you like it in pink. Oh, I'm just saying.
Oops. Sorry about that.
I think it's important to begin this second section by establishing how Cartoon Network as a company has shifted its priorities over the past decade and a half since the City era came to an end. Clearly, the network we have today is not the same network it used to be in 2005, although it's certainly gone through many phases with each new era that came and went on the network. The downfall of the City era obviously began with the shift towards the Yes era, a watered down variation of it that had a bunch of bumpers made featuring Fred Burger and Cheese just saying a bunch of random filler crap. Not the end of the world, but it's clear there wasn't a lot of effort thrown into those. Later in 2007, the Boston bomb scare inspired by the Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie that was coming out at the time led to Jim Samples stepping down as president and a new shift in management coming in to take over where he had left off. Within the span of 2 years' time, the network entered its dark age as CN Real came onto the scene in 2009, a year where not a single new animated series premiered on the channel. Instead, it was filled with a bunch of live-action bullshit that I'm sure 99% of you watching this video are already aware of, although I will say that the two that primarily stuck out to me the most were Destroy Build Destroy because it was hosted by Andrew WK, and Brain Rush, that roller coaster game show that only had 6 episodes and were all filmed on the same 3 roller coasters at the same exact theme park, likely within the same singular weekend. Also, did anyone else ever notice that whichever team failed the minigame in Destroy Build Destroy ended up winning the final competition? At least from the dozen or so episodes I saw, every single time the team that won the advantage competition always lost in the end. But enough of that tangent. CN Real combined with the importing of shows from Canada and the compressing of the schedule was a clear indication that the company had changed its goals. What used to be a network passionate about the art of animation and creativity quickly lost its identity and ended up a confused, muddled mess. Several of its star creatives like Gendy Tartakovsky, Craig McCracken, and C.H. Greenblatt all left the network seeking work elsewhere, and a new wave of staff came in to pick up where they left off. Luckily, the 2010s did see a new wave of animation thanks to the likes of Adventure Time, Regular Show, Gumball, and later Steven Universe, but despite what those shows managed to achieve, they were not enough to recapture the glory of previous eras because the network's branding and series diversity was still lacking. This is an important distinction to make. Plenty of great shows came out of CN between the Yes era and today. Chowder, Flapjack, the 4 I just mentioned, OKKO, etc. But the branding of the channel just didn't live up to what came before. After the fall of CN Real came the Check It era, a CMYK based style of branding that has stuck around to this very day. At one point, there were these 2 mascots of dudes dressed up as the letters C and N of the Cartoon Network logo, but I don't think they ever really caught on because they only lasted for a short while. Now, the Check It era has since passed, and we are in the dimensional / mashup era because I guess there are 2 eras going on simultaneously at the moment, but it has become clear to me that Cartoon Network no longer has the same vested interest in its bumpers that it once did. As I had mentioned while praising the City era, the CMYK eras of Cartoon Network lack a cohesive world. Sure, we can see recognizable characters in the promotional material, but the same level of viewer interaction is no longer present. Watching one character's face mesh into another character is a visually interesting moving image, sure, but watching an image of a character and watching a character are not the same thing. A viewer isn't going to connect with this bumper I'm showing you in the same way they would a city bumper. A visually interesting image does not automatically generate a connection, but seeing the character doing things, animated, that's the key. The characters in these bumpers aren't alive in the same way they are in the CN City. The interaction we witnessed back then featured the characters engaging in activities, interacting with the world around them, in their respective art styles, mind you, which created cohesion. This downward spiral effect is visually interesting to look at, certainly, and I don't want to spread the idea that it's unimpressive. No, it is very much so in its own right, but it can be easily forgotten or mixed up with all of the other downward spiral bumpers that have been created. The fact that the city bumpers had locations to identify made individual bumpers stand out from each other. Here, everything is CMYK and a lot of it blends together. By no means is this meant to be me hating on the dimensional and mashup eras. I think that some of the bumpers I've come across are very well animated and visually interesting to see. However, they fail to capture the same feeling and effect that the city had accomplished. That is the point I am ultimately trying to make. This bumper is essentially saying to me, hey, look at all these characters. Not, hey, look at what all these characters are doing. I know this isn't just me. I'm sure there are definitely others out there that are far more interested in seeing the characters do things rather than just seeing the characters, you know? And then there's the schedule. Now, here's something I haven't talked about in about 3 years. Remember back in December 2017 when I made that video about the CN schedule consisting of 99% Teen Titans Go and a bunch of people on the internet were throwing a hissy fit over it? Yeah, there were some people that got mad at me with my take. One dude even made a rant video about me. But the majority of people actually agreed with me, which was a pleasant surprise. Well, 3 years later, nothing's changed and my viewpoint is still valid, so what does that say? Yep, to this day, Go and Gumball still dominate the majority of the time slots, and while there are other shows premiering on the network here and there, the fact that the schedule has been like this for, 5 years now with practically no improvements whatsoever is clearly indicative that the network does not care. They are not focused on the diversity in their programming the way they used to be. With the death of television taking place in the 2010s, the network began to shift its priorities away from a wide library of shows to only airing the cartoons that were guaranteed to draw in the most viewers. TV has to compete with streaming now, and it is struggling. Teen Titans Go and Gumball brought in viewership, so that's what they prioritized. Times were and still are changing as the rise of streaming takes over, but more on that soon. Cartoon Network is lacking the quantity of cartoons that it used to have at its disposal, especially because it keeps dumping things off its network so quickly. With less shows to choose from, that's fewer characters to appear in promotional material. Let's look at this spiral bumper for the fall of 2020, for instance. This is one of the most recent ones the network has put out. How many franchises are represented here? Well, let's count them. Teen Titans Go, We Baby Bears, Total Dramarama, DC Superhero Girls, Victor and Valentino, Ben 10, Craig of the Creek, Apple and Onion, and Gumball, which has already ended production. 10 shows. And of these shows, Gumball has ended production, We Baby Bears isn't out yet, Ben 10, Apple and Onion, DC Superhero Girls, and Victor and Valentino barely get any airtime when they do air on the network. It's just sad, really. Compared to the City era, that difference is irrefutable. Now certainly one could just say, well, bring back the old shows and air those too, but as most TV networks have proven, that is a terrible business decision. People always want something new. The market has clearly indicated that the majority of people will not go back to watch something they've already seen, especially with how widely available they've become elsewhere. This is why reboots are such a popular thing to make in this current time, because it's a new variation of something they're familiar with. The newness incentivizes people to watch it, and the familiarity makes it easily marketable because there's already a pre-established connection between the viewer and the property. And even still, with the reboots Cartoon Network has produced, they have already dumped the Powerpuff Girls reboot and barely show any of Ben 10 and Thundercats Roar, so it didn't really work out for them in the long run, did it? Another reason I surmise Cartoon Network no longer cares is cost. Take a moment to sit back and think about just how much all of these bumpers would have cost the network to produce. Between all of the characters needing to be animated in their own art styles, the CG city needing to be designed and planned, there was a whole team of people pulling together to lay these out constantly, and there were always new bumpers showing up while this era was going on too. The process was always going. The little stories that were told, the new locations that had to be generated. There's everything from the Utonium residence to the Justice League Watchtower. There's Billy's house, there's the cul-de-sac, Titan Tower. Oh, and lest we forget Foster's home. As I mentioned earlier, Cartoon Network even went the extra mile to create event-themed bumpers for things like summer, Halloween, Christmas. The city was always teeming with life and excitement in the few years it lasted because it adjusted to the times just like the real world did. That's not to say this isn't done elsewhere, because of course networks always promote Halloween in October and Christmas in December, but this was a step up. There was a lot of effort and time put into this, and it's fair to say these likely cost a lot of money to produce for what was essentially taking up time that could have been dedicated to commercials. And there it is. Commercials. The fact that the network went the extra mile with these bumpers was great for the time. Bumpers usually do serve an important purpose for introducing people to the programming they have available on the network. People clearly like bumpers, otherwise people wouldn't still be talking about them 15 years later. Now let's bring this back to today and how commercials matter. If Cartoon Network has a smaller pool of programming that it airs, and only a small handful of shows dominate the network's time slots, why would they use bumpers to advertise other programs that they're barely even airing? Since the Season 2 premiere of the Powerpuff Girls reboot in March of 2017, the series primarily aired one new episode a week on Sunday evenings with minimal advertising, and then never aired on the network again, and nobody acknowledged this. Except me, of course, because, well, obviously, I followed the show. The Ben 10 reboot and DC Superhero Girls are also treated almost the same way by the network in today's time. With a minimal number of shows airing at a given time, anything outside of a simple, hey, this show exists, is all the network can really do. Hence why some shows appear in this spiral just to fill up space. It's insincere, and with less people watching TV nowadays, more commercials are needed to compensate for it. Those bumpers take up time that could be going to advertising, and with less viewership now than ever before, clearly the network's priorities had to shift away to focus on money rather than art. It's simple from a business standpoint. Why spend money on bumpers when they can make money airing commercials in the same time slot? That right there is the most straightforward answer as to why the network has never made another era on par with the City or Powerhouse. Bumpers are expensive, commercials are not. Bumpers cost money, commercials earn money. In an age where television is clearly dying and streaming has come to dominate the market, there is less leeway for bumpers taking up airtime on the network. And that's where the third major attribute comes in.
Is there a problem, Professor?
Oh, hello, number one. I seem to have locked myself out of my car.
And now he is out of cheese. Crackers! I'll need some 2x4s. I'll be right back. Bring more cheese!
It's no problem. I'll just call my auto club.
How many geniuses does it take to unlock a car door? Hey, why don't you use some chemical X?
So with AT&T, you can pick the perfect plan for each family member with the features they want, like HBO Max or... What was that? Happens every time I say HBO Max.
Cool. HBO Max.
Streaming has become the dominant form of television and media consumption in such a short period of time. Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, HBO Max, and so on have all come to integrate their libraries in the contemporary streaming format, and given how current trends are projecting, it is more than likely that streaming is here to stay. I personally have no issue with this, seeing as I haven't watched television on a consistent basis since like 2013, if not longer ago than that. Unfortunately, however, new formats do lead to old format practices becoming archaic and outdated, and bumpers tragically fall into that category. One of the major benefits to streaming is that services like Disney Plus and Netflix don't air commercials between their shows. It's as simple as click and go without interruption. Now, of course, there are other services like Hulu that have lower pay plans which do feature commercials, but even then the commercials on Hulu are just straight up commercials, not bumpers. As such, a streaming service without commercials also means a streaming service without bumpers. They just flat out don't have a place on services like the ones I mentioned. YouTube TV and Hulu TV are different stories because that's essentially televised streaming, but even then bumpers for programming on those are almost non-existent compared to their abundance on television networks. That said, there really isn't a good place for bumpers to coexist on streaming services because of the way the services have been established and are set up. There might be some sort of possible workaround that could be developed, but anything that would involve a bumper playing in front of a show could be intrusive to viewers and might lead to a lot of complaining, and it's not like a section for new bumpers would do particularly well. I mean, don't get me wrong, it'd be the coolest shit ever if HBO Max just put up a compilation of all their old bumpers under the CN section, but I honestly doubt that will ever happen. I don't see why they couldn't do that, but hey, I'm not in charge, so I can't control anything. Bumpers have become archaic by today's standards, as sad as that is to say. One final point that I want to cover in regards to tying Cartoon Network specifically back into this streaming conversation, the network has been putting some of its original programming on HBO Max and making it exclusive to that service rather than airing it on the network itself. Infinity Train Book 3, The Fungies, Adventure Time Distant Lands, not to mention the recently announced series planned to come to the service such as Jellystone and Unicorn Warriors Eternal, headed by C.H. Greenblatt and Gendy Tartakovsky respectively, whom I both admire greatly. With Cartoon Network beginning to shift a lot of its attention onto the streaming service, that means less focus might be given to the television network, and with television dying out as it is, who knows what's going to happen in the network in the future. I'd hate to see the end of an era, but the realist in me is saying it's only a matter of time. Truth be told, I'm sure a lot of people are more upset about that fact than I am, but there's still a part of me sad to see this sort of thing get lost in time thanks to the advancement in technology. But then the logical part of me says, well, face the facts. It is extremely unlikely, given the factors I've discussed in this video, that we will ever get an era on the same level as CN City ever again. There are so many factors working against that from happening that it pains me to say, I truly do hate accepting this. But given what I've observed and analyzed using logic and reason, I'm setting my emotional and nostalgic attachment aside to accept this. It's not impossible for the city to come back, but it is extremely unlikely. OKKO Crossover Nexus was the closest thing to a CN City revival we've gotten in the last 15 years. And as great as it was seeing that setting again with all of the references to former Cartoon Network programming, the network itself didn't really seem to embrace the special as much as the online community did. I gotta thank Ian JQ for putting in the effort to pay homage to Cartoon Network's history when the network itself barely put any effort into its 25th anniversary celebration outside of that one animation. Even 2012 Cartoon Network did a better job at paying homage to its history with those black environment bumpers with all of the characters engaging at the celebration party. Heck, I'd say that was the closest thing we ever got to having actual bumpers resemble the CN City era, and that was almost a decade ago at this point. The way I see it, if the network really wanted to latch on to nostalgia and revive the city era, they totally could have done that by now. Given how current times are changing, I just don't see it happening at this point. Streaming is taking over, and an unfortunate drawback of that is the likelihood of these bumpers dwindling entirely. I don't like seeing it happen. I know I'm a broken record at this point, but I can relax knowing that the online fan base for the Silver Age of Cartoon Network has and will continue to live on. I've seen archivers do their part to try and recover as much footage from this era as they can, and so far their efforts have been to a massive success. I'll post a link to a Lost Media wiki in the description that fully lists out in great detail the sheer number of bumpers that have been found or are still missing. There's also this fan site that popped up a while ago dedicated to the city era of Cartoon Network. I don't know when it first popped up, and at the time I'm making this video, it is still unfinished. I don't know who's in charge of it, so for all I know the project was abandoned, but if the person or people in charge are still working on it, then I fully implore them to keep at it. And hey, if you're watching this video, please Keep it up. Hopefully this video might even inspire others to continue the search, keep the love for CN City alive, and just remember, you can always go back and watch old bumpers online in your spare time. Just because something is in the past doesn't mean it's necessarily gone forever. Look on the bright side. Archivers and compilers alike are heroes for keeping old media alive. And if there's anything I want you to take away from this video, it's not that Cartoon Network is a shell of its former self, it's that the CN City era earned its legacy as the silver age of Cartoon Network, and it should be remembered for that. I implore people to keep the city alive. Even though the bumpers have ceased airing on Cartoon Network, the memory can still exist. And hey, if the OKKO crossover was able to reference the setting, then it's not impossible for the channel to bring it back again in the future. As I've highlighted in the video, CN as a company just doesn't seem to have the same passion or motive for its history as it used to, so I'm not getting my hopes up. There will always be a part of me, however, that secretly hopes one day the network will be able to recapture the same visceral experience that the City era was able to provide. Thank you for watching, and this is Cartoon Network.
But where do I go if I want an afro?
My silly friend Blue, here's what you should do. Just get on down to Cartoon.
Wow! Where's that again?
Cartoon?
No, that's not it.